Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real, where we talk about things that matter with people who matter. And as you know, if you listen to this at all, I really prefer to have conversations with people instead of at them. So I share ideas here, which turn into a podcast episode when I don't have a guest to interview. And this is one of those weeks where I'm wondering and pondering about things, and then I share them here in the hope that someone who's watching live or later will add comments. And I'd like to know from any of you who are watching live or later what I could do to increase engagement, because I know that I like to have these conversations because I hear what I say later, which sounds kind of odd. I don't always have a lot of notes. I just talk through things and then I can hear what I say later. That's what I'm learning it means to allow emergent thoughts to come through. One of the roots of the book Chris and I are writing, that's really close to coming out, is emergent conversation. And we recognize that when conditions are right and people feel safe, they can allow those thoughts that come to them to be added to a conversation without having to censor them. And that's what I like to do here as I'm working through some of my own beliefs and thoughts. And so it's always more fun when people add comments here or live, sure, but also later if you're watching it later. So if you feel so moved, please put comments in. I'm watching them as we go. Today, I want to talk about my very favorite coaching question. And if you've worked with me at all in the past as a coachee or as someone in an audience where I've spoken, you might have heard this question before. I like to ask myself, especially when I feel any kind of frustration or, yeah, I guess frustration is the best word. When I feel frustrated or upset about something, I like to ask myself this question. And the question is, what's missing, the presence of which would make a positive difference? And we might not know because we haven't really pondered that question. So we might not know what's missing. What I'm recognizing a lot as I'm observing the state of affairs in the world these days is a lot of people are upset and frustrated because they want other people to be different. And so if a boss upsets or frustrates you or a coworker or a family member or the person at the gas station, if other people are frustrating and upsetting you, you might want to take a look in the mirror, because what I've learned over the years is anything that frustrates or upsets me is actually for me. Because my anger and upset and frustration is pointing back to me in a way that would say, okay, what about this is making me upset? It's not the thing itself, it's underneath. What is making me upset about this? And so, what I want to think about today are a couple of things. What I'm noticing and what is causing me to be frustrated and upset, I'm going to share here in the hope that by sharing it, you can see some of yourself in my frustration or not. And it might not serve any of us well if we get upset and frustrated at each other. So if I say something that you don't agree with, instead of getting mad at me, you might take a look and go, what is it about what Jody just said that's frustrating me? What I recognized a while ago now is when I watch a couple people I know in person post things on social media that make me upset, that cause me to be upset. I had to dig deeper. It's not that person who's making me upset. And what I recognized is when people put a statement on social media, like this is what it is. When people do that, that frustrates me because I don't necessarily think there's any engagement possibility in a statement except to agree or disagree. There's no openness for a dialogue. And what I recognized was that's what frustrates me. It has nothing to do with the post or the person, it's the way it's stated. And so, because for me, I want connection and communication and collaboration. Those are the things that are important to me. When someone makes a post that says this is what it is, and maybe I don't agree, and I say, could you tell me more? And then they attack me, that's where I wonder, huh, what is this for me? And what I recognize is if my happiness or my contentedness depends on whether or not someone else changes, that's a really huge aha. And that's what I'm kind of throwing out to my coaching clients these days is if your boss or your spouse or your friends or somebody makes you upset, causes you to be upset, you don't have to take that ball. You don't have to catch that. You don't have to play that game. Nobody, and then I go back to things I've read forever. You've probably heard these forever too. No one can make you upset without your permission. Well, all of those makes so much sense when I can put the context around that and go, oh, that's what, I don't know, Eleanor Roosevelt said, 100 years ago. Oh, okay, now I understand that in a way that makes it personal to me. And so for me, when I have context and when I can understand the whole picture, that's where I can go, oh, I get it now. And so rarely in my life have I asked the questions that would broaden the context. I've just assumed that if I ask a question, it means I'm dumb. Because that's how people have occurred to me in the past. It feels like very few people actually want to engage in a dialogue that would help me personally get more context. And so I am recognizing this for myself. And when I think about that question, what's missing, the presence of which would make a positive difference, what I'm kind of landing on these days is, and please don't hear this as a judgment, I'm saying it as an observation, but what I'm recognizing that's missing is personal accountability. I spent 10 years working with John Miller's work, QBQ, the question behind the question, which is all about personal accountability. It's about taking responsibility for, in this case, I'll say my frustrations and upsets. If I take accountability for my own frustrations and upset, and I say I'm 100% responsible for my reaction, things can really shift. It doesn't have to have anything to do with the person or the situation that's making me upset. It's what I'm choosing to catch. They can throw gotcha bombs at me all the time. I don't have to catch them. And so when I catch them and then look at them and go, well, he's stupid for saying that, or she doesn't understand me, that's not about them. It's not about them. None of this is about them. Them, insert group here. And so I recognize what has caused me to be upset and frustrated. And that's what I'm noticing. And I'm noticing that other people are frustrated and upset. And I'm wondering if it's because what's missing is personal accountability, personal responsibility. Ego gets in the way. It makes people blind and deaf to the truth. And again, we can have a whole conversation, we can have a discussion or a debate about what is truth. And then I go back to Byron Katie's work, The Work. You can go to thework.com and you can learn about her work, which is called The Work. And it's about truth. Like, do I believe my thoughts? If I believe my thoughts because I believe that I am right, that goes back to being below the line. I'm right, everybody else is wrong. That's making me upset because they're stupid and they should be different. I'm witnessing that a lot. And I'm doing my best to take myself out of the personal space of that and observe the higher perspective. Because when people are yelling at me, I suppose not yelling, but on social media about, I referenced this earlier in an earlier podcast episode about how I made a comment on somebody's post and they called me all kinds of names and questioned my intelligence and all kinds of things. And I took it personally at first, and then I thought, they don't even know me. They don't know me as a human. They only know me as the words I've just typed here. And so making a judgment about somebody else doesn't have anything to do with the other person. It has everything to do with the lens we are looking through. And just because a lie is repeated over and over again does not make it true. The truth needs no defense. And just because someone says something over and over and over again, which eventually can wear us down and go, okay, fine, whatever, because it's just too hard to dispute it or too hard to stand for something different, that's where lies become just the way it is. Or that's when we start making excuses for people who lie. Well, that's just the way she is, or that's just the way he is. So if we are trying to put out diversions, diversion from the truth, and we're trying to create a solution to something that isn't even the truth, that's about diverting from the actual conversation. So we can get really creative about the lies we tell. And over time, they feel true to us because we've told them over and over again. I mean, there are lies about a lot of things, and I say to myself, I don't want to get political, and yet, what is taking up most of the mind and heart space in the world these days? Politics, right? And so, is it true? Can we look into the claims made that people are crossing borders illegally and being paid $100 Visa gift cards and being escorted to polls so that they can vote? I mean, is that true? Could that be true? If we think about that logically, does that make logical sense? Yet over and over and over, when we're told things, eventually we go, well, yeah, that's true. I heard it from Mary, and then I heard it from Sue, and then I heard it from Bob, so it must be true. And we stop questioning the things we hear that don't sit right with us, that we're like, well, wait a second, that doesn't seem right. We've lost our ability to think critically about things because we're inundated with so many diversions that eventually we go, well, it must be me. I must be the one. I, I've done that. And I'm in a space now where I'm questioning things that I didn't used to question. Not in a bad way. I don't want to be a jerk about things. I want to say, tell me more about that. Help me understand that better. Give me more context. And if people can't give me more context, they will start blaming me. And they will say, you are stupid. You should know better. You haven't done your homework. I mean, all those things I've been told over years of asking more questions. Can you help me understand what it's like from your perspective? I'd love to understand that. Well, no, you're stupid if you don't know it. Do your own research. Don't ask me. I've heard all of those things. And I think about this term that I heard last week. Was it last week or was it this week? I can't even remember. Called collective narcissism. And I downloaded a white paper about this because it was so fascinating to me when I understood that there's this phenomenon called collective narcissism. And I'll just in a real general broad overview, collective narcissism is a belief that one's own group, your in-group, is exceptional but not sufficiently recognized by others. And so what happens in that space, according to this white paper, is people get into a space of victim and want to justify their in-group belief. So I thought it was interesting as I read through this, and there are a couple of things that the white paper is distinguishing between, here, I'll just read you this. The idea that a positive belief about one's own group, the in-group, is associated with discrimination and hostility toward other people just because they belong to a different group, the out-group, has a long tradition in social sciences. So this isn't anything new. However, it has also been observed that people endorse positive beliefs about their in-group without being hostile toward others. So it's possible to believe what I believe without having to say somebody else is stupid. And that's a possibility. And that was from 1999. Studies differentiate self-esteem, which is a belief that one is of high value, from narcissism, a belief that one is superior and requires admiration and special recognition, and link only narcissism to interpersonal hostility. So it's possible to feel, strong about your own beliefs and confident about who you are without having to be hostile towards someone else. It's possible. Given that people project beliefs about themselves onto their in-groups, people project beliefs about themselves into their in-groups, it is possible to differentiate collective self-esteem, which is a belief that the in-group is of high value and has a reason to be proud, It's a team, right? I played for the Concordia Gobbers. I was proud of my team. I had collective pride. It's also called in-group satisfaction, and that's very distinct from collective narcissism, which is a belief that one's own group is exceptional but not sufficiently recognized by others. And that ends up in intergroup hostility. That's really interesting to me. And there's a distinction. I also think of that personally as a not a group but an individual, the distinction between being confident and being arrogant, between being above the line and below the line. Below the line is committed to being right. Kathy says, I wonder how and where this conversation would show up in spiral dynamics. Well, fun that you would ask that, Kathy, because we are actually having that conversation in the Enlightened Leadership Lab on Mondays. We are going to take what we're learning from the fourth turning is here, which is historical turning in history, with human evolution of spiral dynamics. That's another conversation, but that will be what we will take a look at. And without getting into too many details about spiral dynamics, that's a whole other conversation. So thank you for bringing that up. But what I recognize is even from going back to teams and having pride in your team, you know, my Concordia team, I was so proud of my women's basketball team this year, which they got to the Elite Eight in Division III, better than a lot of other teams in that tournament. I was so proud of them. That doesn't mean that I think, oh, we made it and you didn't, so we're better than you. You're stupid, you're bad, you're dumb. No, what would be the point of that? It's pride in our maroon and gold and singing the school song, and you know, but that's awesome. I love that kind of collective pride. And I watch, you probably know this about me, I'm a huge basketball fan. I watched a lot of basketball over the last couple of weeks, and I watched the Maryland women's basketball coach, how would I say this? Coach Hard, one of her players, in her face, poking her in the chest, saying a lot of things that if you just watched the body language, you could draw a conclusion. But once you know what's behind the story and you understand that elite players on basketball teams want to be coached hard. They want to be coached hard. They want to be held to a higher standard. Could we say that? They understand that it's about taking personal responsibility and owning their behaviors, owning what does and doesn't work, owning what leads to a basket and what doesn't. Those are just objective ways of looking at the way things happen. And what I'm recognizing as it relates to collective narcissism and maybe personal accountability, the distinction is victim thinking. And victim thinking, as we said earlier, collective narcissism is believing that I'm not recognized for how great I am. And so victims don't take accountability typically. They blame, they project, they point their finger out at someone else. It can't be me. It has to be someone else who did something wrong, because heaven forbid I could be wrong. And that's where I observe things right now, and I observe them in myself. And I wonder when I feel the need to double down instead of being open and asking more questions, which is why people are upset with me these days, because I ask more questions, and then to them, it might feel like I'm shining a spotlight in their eyes. I've been told that. Jody, your light shines so bright, it hurts my eyes. And I've thought in the past, oh my gosh, I'll turn it down. No, no. If my light hurts your eyes, maybe it's time to look in your own mirror. And maybe all of us who are trying to have these kinds of conversations about leadership, about coaching the way that Maryland coach coached, and I wrote this in a post. I actually witnessed a very similar thing happen at almost the exact same time. I'm going to tell you this just between us. I was watching the Maryland game on my phone while I was working at the NDSU Columbia women's basketball game in Fargo. And so it was a timeout for the NDSU game, and I happened to catch this in interplay between the coach and the player for Maryland. I saw it because the camera zoomed in on it. It was on my phone, and I watched that happen live. And then the play resumed at NDSU, and I watched the Columbia coach do almost the exact same thing to one of her players. It was so fascinating. And she said something like, are you 100% in this game right now? Because if you're not, we're going to put somebody in who is. And there was 1.1 seconds left on the clock. and that player went to the bench and somebody else checked in with 1.1 seconds left. That game was well in the grasp of Columbia. They were winning, but I was so impressed with that coach and her ability to say that, and to have that player not say, "You don't talk to me like that," which is what I witness a lot. When people are in that collective narcissism or that victim mode, which says, "You don't talk to me like that," that is an example of not a great relationship. And what I saw and witnessed from Maryland and Columbia was a huge relationship, a tough love relationship, where when people want the best for you, they're going to tell you the truth, even when it's hard to hear. And if we deny the truth because we say, "Well, that's not true, you're a liar, you're not telling me what I want to hear," that's a sign of what I'm learning is collective narcissism. And the truth in a basketball game, the truth is, it's easy to look at. Your player that you were guarding got by you and scored a layup. So there was something you did that prevented that basket from, or prevented that player from getting to the basket. That's the truth. It's not my fault. Not my fault. My other player missed it. That's what victim thinking does. Not me, not me, couldn't be me. And so I go back to the first question I asked here. What's missing? The presence of which would make a positive difference. Personal accountability. Personal responsibility. It's what Bob Chapman calls responsible freedom. If I want the freedom to be myself and do the things I want to do, then I have to accept the responsibility that comes with that. And if I'm not willing to do that, then I'm stuck in victim thinking. Victim thinking, not me, not my fault, not my problem. That is a dangerous place to be. And we are there. Please help me understand better how I could be wrong about that as it relates to politics right now. Help me understand how I could be wrong about that, because I am willing to be wrong. I want to be wrong about that. I want to be wrong about how people are not taking accountability and responsibility. Help me understand that, because what I'm witnessing is opposite. And if you're going to tell me then you need to watch a different news source, I've watched every news source out there. I'm watching every news source I can find. I have right here in front of me on my laptop the all sides media bias chart. If you tell me I'm not trying hard enough to find news sources, that is a lie. That is a lie. And it won't be true because you say it over and over again and accuse me of that. That's not true. I am doing everything I can to understand the whole picture. And that is probably the biggest frustration for me, because I don't know how else to say what I'm saying. And what I'm learning is to not own that as much as I used to, because I would own everything. I would say, "Oh, you're upset with me? Then I need to change. Oh, you don't like that? Then I'll change. You don't want to hear the truth? Then I'll change the way I'm saying it." The truth doesn't cease to be true just because you don't believe it. And the truth needs no defense. So your reaction to my truth is not my issue. And that is an ownership that I'm willing to take, even if you hear that as something other than what my intention is. That's not for me. That's not for me. When I want to connect with people on an energetic level, and the energetic level is a vibrational mismatch, I will adjust as much as I can. And at some point, it's just a vibrational mismatch. And so if any of us, leadership, we're talking about leadership, if we have leadership standards, think about your leadership standards. I put my hands up like this if you're watching the video of this, because the poles that hold up the high jump bar are called standards. The poles that hold up the high jump bar are called standards. And if you think about the high jump in track, you start the standards low enough so the bar can be jumped over by as many participants as possible. So the bar is lower to start. But after the competition begins, it's never lowered. It's only ever raised. As we raise our standards, it raises the bar. And if that means some people can't jump over that, then they need to go practice. because we're not lowering our standards. We're not lowering our standards. I'm not lowering my standards because it's difficult for you. I know that sounds harsh, but when I watch the way people are coaching their players, and the players are elite players who want to get better, they're telling the truth. They're telling the truth. And I'm thinking about Jack Nicholson, right? You can't handle the truth. Hmm. And when in my life have I not been able to handle the truth? I was coached. I'm an All-American basketball player. My team won the national championship when I was in college. I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be coached hard. And I know what it does to me as a player. If it causes me to say, quit yelling at me, I'm better than that, then I find I'm part of a collective narcissist group. Collective narcissism, a belief that one's own group is exceptional but not sufficiently recognized by others. You don't know how great we are. We'll just keep showing you by telling you lies and making you believe that that's the truth. That's collective narcissism. So what's really missing? Self-awareness, ownership, accountability, responsible freedom, and true leadership. Just because it's hard to see doesn't mean it's not true. I put a comment on somebody else posting that about the Maryland coach. And I said, and I was watching the comments and I was appalled at what the comments were saying. And so I put a comment that said, commenters, we can do better. Think before you post. And I got attacked for that because somebody said something I'm not going to repeat here, but I thought, wow, there's a lot of evidence when you start looking for collective narcissism where people have believed that their group, whatever their group is superior and can't be touched. And anybody who wants to give more facts or have a rational conversation with them, it will not work because apparently logic and truth doesn't matter to these groups. So the white paper is about 6 pages. It goes through hypersensitivity to insult and exaggeration of malevolent intentions of other people is one of the subheads. The in-group over-exclusion effect. When is collective narcissism more likely? What can be done about collective narcissism? There's a section at the end of the article about that. So I will put a link to this article if you're interested in more information about it. And if not, I get it because this isn't sexy. I understand. Very likely that very few people will hear anything I've said here today because that's not what we want to post. We don't want to be accountable and responsible, apparently. And those of us who do are a smaller minority. It's worth it to me to speak truth as I see it and attract the small minority of people who want to have these kinds of conversations than to try to adjust my truth to have more people hear it. Okay. So because my biggest hope is connection, I'll keep speaking what I see as truth and hope to keep learning. Like Michelangelo said at the end of his life, and I'm still learning. That's me. So thanks if you've made it through here today. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your comment, Kathy. We'll talk more about spiral dynamics as we go. The Enlightened Leadership Lab on Mondays at 4 Central is where we have these kinds of conversations. It's a membership group. We'd love to have you take a look at it. If you're interested, I'll put the link in the comments here too. I don't see in my circle these kinds of conversations growing. I don't see these being places where people are flocking to. Okay, flock where you will. And I will continue to have these kinds of hard conversations in the hope that at some point I can continue to learn as well. And if that's something that you're interested in, please follow me, follow what we're up to here. Tell people you know who might want to be in these kinds of conversations, and we'll see if we can continue to tell the truth, even when it's not sexy. So go find a way to be real this week, as always, everybody, and thank you for being here. Talk to you again.